Hi, everyone.
Greetings. In the finished mystery, we are at the end of chapter 2, and we're still in the church of Thyatira, which is the longest of the 7 epistles that Christ gave to the churches back then. And we made the point in the last video that, well, this is the pivot verse. This is the verse that is your takeaway if you're actually reading this in the original context, which is this about apostate Christendom? Which is what you're more or less saying here. It's all about Jezebel. You concentrate on the unfaithful aspect of the church of Thyatira. But there are faithful ones there. We've made that point now in the last 3 videos, I think. And the pivot verse, therefore, becomes this one, the takeaway. What are you supposed to do about this unfaithfulness within your church? Only hold fast what you have until I come. Notice he doesn't say, get out of the church of Thyatira and move to Smyrna, where things are good. No, you're supposed to hold fast what you have. So the wheat and the weeds growing together. Now, verses 26 to 29, they take up in one page. Here's what those verses say. This is the end of the letter to the church in Thyatira. The one who conquers and who keeps my works until the end, to him I will give authority over the nations. And he will rule them with a rod of iron, as when earthen pots are broken in pieces, even as I myself have received authority from my Father. And I will give him, that is the one who conquers, the morning star. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Have Jehovah's Witnesses heard what Christ said to this, you think, unfaithful church, this apostate church that you think represents the Middle Ages up until the Reformation? He says, hold fast till I come. And he also says that the hope that they have involves their rulership over the nations.
So
That's not the one hope Jehovah's Witnesses have today.
That's right. They do have a reference to Revelation 5:10, which most witnesses do know. But do they think in terms of this as an earthly ruling on the earth? They have them ruling over the earth.
No, first they don't
heaven,
think
right?
that the rulers are on earth, although the
That's
Revelation says they are.
Yeah.
And they don't think they're among those rulers.
Yeah.
They think they're being ruled. Well, that's not it's not the hope of the church of Thyatira. And by the way, that's not the hope of the church for the last 2,000 years. The heavenly destiny, as you think about it, involves rulership. And all Christians are parties to that one hope.
Even the idea that the rulership, it says, I will give the power of the nations. I don't know how it worded it.
I will give authority over the nations.
Okay, so they have power here of the nations. But giving power to nations, in the Witnesses' Watchtowerr way of presenting the millennium, there is no nations.
That's right. So you kind of see everybody living together in one place, all with their different cultures blended together.
Yeah. So that doesn't seem to match even with Revelation 5.
No, and it doesn't match with the prophets of the Old Testament either. That grants that the nations will survive, or the Armageddon scenario, whatever you think that looks like.
They have everyone gone except them.
And then you have
whoever
Christ,
they raise.
the so-called parable of the sheep and the goats. You have Christ gathering all nations before him to be judged. So the idea of continuing nations, surviving Armageddon and going through the millennium is right there. For instance, look up Zechariah chapter 14, for example, where you have mention of the scenario afterwards, how all the nations, the Gentiles, will go up to Jerusalem for the festival. And there you have an explicit mention of Egypt going up or not going up. So your scenario that all nations and nation states are wiped out by Armageddon and only you are left is just not biblical. Yeah.
There was one little section in here we thought we would read from the book here, from the Finished Mystery.
Page 44, is it?
Yes, page 44, the part that's, even as I received of my Father. This is what they say. The Father, justice, decrees their unworthiness to continue longer. Their iniquity is come to the full. 400 years from October 31, 1517, and October 31, 1917.
What's that got to do with anything?
So, I
Revelation.
read that and I thought, okay, so you can add years from where? Why is this the start and the end?
Well, the beginning has to do with their next chapter, chapter 3. And by the way, this has all been abandoned now, all this chronological stuff. And the seven churches, typical.
Yeah.
They've got Wycliffe, Luther, and Russell being the last three of the seven angels of the churches, right? So they're building up to the connection between Wycliffe, which they've already made in this chapter, now to Luther. 1517 is the great turning point in Luther's life when he posted the 95 Theses on the door of Wittenberg. What's that got to do with them? Well, they think that was a witness, that he was the man that Jesus Christ used at that time. This belief, of course, has been abandoned. But 1917, though, speaks for itself, doesn't it?
So the 1917, that's when this book came out. So they've always been pressing. It's right now. It's coming. It's like 2 seconds away. It's always right on the cusp of it.
Yeah, and that is why I wanted to show you these two editions, which are cited in here.
Their
both
only
titles
references are to Russell's books.
The stress is that they believed that Armageddon would be over by 1914. When it wasn't over in 1914, they then made a bridge, which was Armageddon has started, and the World War I is the beginning of it, and it will lead straight to the judgment, which will happen in 1918 and 1920. The fire will come from heaven by 1920. They had said Christendom will fall in 1918. Well, obviously none of that happened, but it's all in here. Battle of Armageddon, that this is what they expected in advance. This is the 4th volume of the Studies in Scriptures. This is its original title, The Day of Vengeance. So when it was Millennial Dawn, it was the Day of Vengeance. That's referenced on this page, by the way, that title. And then the replacement title was The Battle of Armageddon, all of which they were saying was basically taking place right now in the World War I period.
So I don't think as witnesses we really understood what they were teaching back then. And what they thought was going to happen in 1914 has been rewritten for the witnesses today. It's not what they expected then.
Interesting that right at the end of the chapter, there's a reference in their point, very small point, about the last verse of the chapter, verse 29. What does it say?
He that hath an ear.
He who hath an ear attuned to the harp divine. So that supplies the title of Rutherford's first hardcover book, which was
The Harp of God.
Harp of God, after he had written the long booklet called Millions Now Living Will Never Die. So you see the emphasis on 1914 being the beginning of the end, before it was the end of the end, the beginning of the end, and millions of now living, that generation that Russell was part of, will never die. So the lie has been there from the very beginning. And I think we need to say that emphatically, that we need to test the claims of an organization to be the only one exclusively used by God in the last days.
So the two videos that we're going to link are Kingdom Arrived, 1878, Armageddon Ends, 1914. That's one of them. And the second one is 7 Predictions for 1914. How many came true?
See you next time.